Me now is the mayor of St. Paul, Melvin Carter. Mayor Carter, thanks so much for joining us. I want to clarify something. You originally said that every single person arrested on Friday night in your city was from out of state. Local news investigations suggest that's not true. You have conceded that. But a larger question here, do you have a better idea of who the people rioting and looting are?
Well, good morning and thanks for having me on. I'll tell you this. What we know is there's some people in our community, there's some people in our streets who are driven there by a passion for our community, by a love for our community, and by a deep desire to never see the painful loss of life, like the video of the killing of George Floyd that we all saw this week. And then there's folks in our streets who are there to burn down our Black-owned barbershops, to burn down our family-owned businesses, our immigrant-owned restaurants. And it is very clear to me that those people are not driven by a love for our community. And there's no way you can argue that those actions are designed to produce a better future for our community. Quite the opposite.
More than 170 businesses have been looted. The governor of your state says that your city is on fire. The National Guard has already been deployed in Minnesota. And now the Secretary of Defense is offering military support to help keep the peace in Minnesota. Will that be necessary?
You know, you're right. Right in St. Paul, we've had over 170 businesses damaged. We are seeing in St. Paul and obviously around the country, Jake, this level of rage and anger that frankly is legitimate. As we see this just horrific video of George Floyd being just suffocated to death, the fact that we have to say, if I tell you about that unarmed African-American man who pleaded for his breath as he was killed by law enforcement, I have to clarify for you whether I'm talking about George Floyd or Eric Garner. That speaks volumes about the state of where we are in America right now. The rage out there is predictable, it's understandable, and it's legitimate. Unfortunately, it's being expressed right now over the past week in ways that are destructive and unacceptable. We are working with our law enforcement partners. We are working with our community partners to not only restore a sense of order right now, but to build a sense of confidence that we are building our way towards a better future.
Do you need the military help that Secretary of Defense Esper is offering?
You know, look, I'll tell you this. The one thing that would help us ease some of this rage, ease some of this energy in our community right now is some level of assurance. And this is what makes all of this so much worse. As we know that George Floyd is not just a single solitary name, but he's a man. He's an unarmed African-American man who unfortunately has had his name this past week join a list of names that is just far too long. And I want to be clear, you know, this killing did not start 10 years ago when we started seeing these videos. The only thing that's changed is all of a sudden we have cameras everywhere. So this is the same thing that my grandfather and my parents and my aunts and uncles have told me about for generations. And the thing that I think would help us more than military support is some assurance across our country that we possess a legal and judicial system that has the capacity and the capability to hold someone accountable when something this blatant, something this disgusting, something this well documented happens in plain view for all of us to see.
I think it was Will Smith who said, racism isn't getting worse, it's getting filmed. Speaking about accountability, the Hennepin County prosecutor has charged former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin with third-degree murder. Prosecutors are considering charges for the other 3 officers. Based on what you've seen, do you think those other 3 officers should be facing charges as well, including potentially murder?
Jake, my father's a retired St. Paul police officer. We were walking through a local store when I was a child one day, and somebody was caught for shoplifting, and he went to help. And I said, Dad, why don't you just tell them you're not on duty right now? And he looked at me and laughed and said, I'm always on duty. Our officers have a duty to intervene. They have a duty. We all know that the basic charge of a police officer is to help when people are hurt. So when all of humanity can look at this video and say that's disgusting, that's unacceptable, and yet somehow we have 4 officers in the video, who 3 of whom sat there and either helped hold Mr. Floyd down or stood guard over the scene while it happened. That is incredible insult to humanity. It's an insult to our officers. Our St. Paul officers are just as distraught over this as I am, and it points to unmistakably, if it was just one, you might be able to say rogue officer, bad apple, but when you have 4 officers in the video, all responsible for the taking of George Floyd's life, it points to a culture, a normalized a culture that's accepted, that's been accepted, and that cannot be a part of our culture moving forward. What we're calling for right now is peace. We're asking our folks to protest peacefully, to scream from the top of their lungs that this can never happen again, and that not just one, but all 4 of those officers must be held accountable. But we're not. So we are asking for peace. We're not asking for patience. I'm not asking people to wait patiently while we slowly stem the tide of unarmed black men killed by police. You know, as an African-American man in America, I know very well that too often never really means later. But this energy that we've seen consume our country this week is like an atomic energy. It could
Your daughter on your phone, ringing and ringing, don't you leave it alone. Daughter's calling and the show is sweet.
We're asking our young people, we're asking everybody who's outraged by that to channel this impatience, to channel this frustration, to channel this anger toward not destroying our communities, but destroying the laws, destroying the legal precedents, destroying the police union contracts, destroying all of those forces that make it so difficult to hold someone accountable when when one of our African American men's life is taken in an unacceptable way.
Yeah. All right, Mayor Carter, thank you so much for your time today, and we're praying for peace for the people of Minneapolis, St. Paul as well. Thank you so much. 70 people were arrested in Atlanta last night with the